Hi, I'm Dan Allender, and I want to speak for a moment to the men who are listening, and even more so to the people who love them. Since 1988, I've been leading recovery weeks for both men and women. And these 6-day in-person intensive workshops are designed to create a healing, relational space for survivors of childhood sexual abuse to engage their stories. But here's the reality. Many men struggle to even name their experiences as abuse. How many men have been able to name their first experience with pornography as a form of sexual abuse? It's so hard to name what still bears shame. And we've got to have both the support and courage to be able to enter those stories with a kind of kindness that allows them to be radically changed. But when your culture tells you to just push through, to move on, to carry it alone, but you just know that silence will never erase the wounds, the impact of betrayal, powerlessness, shame, self-contempt shapes the way we lived and the way we live. And it will not change through mere desire or prayer. It's got to be through the engagement with story. And that's why Recovery Week exists. This is really a rare opportunity of time and space to step away from the noise, to be in a room with other men who understand what's really happening in your body, your heart, and mind as a consequence of the past abuse, and have both the language and the courage to begin the process of helping you reclaim your story. Every year, a small group of men say yes to this process, and every year, in ways that will sound perhaps like a sales job, but let me simply tell you, we have seen some of the sweetest and most profound transformation that I see in my work. It is one of the most favored and significant weeks I spend every year. Though this is an advertisement, it's more of an invitation. And I hope you'll consider joining us in this life-changing experience. If you want to learn more about the upcoming dates and the application process for the Recovery Week, you can look at the allendercenter.org/workshops. Thank you for listening to the Allender Center podcast. I'm Dr. Dan Allender.
And I'm Rachael Clinton Chen. We're fiercely committed to providing hope and healing to a fragmented world.
And restoration for the heart.
Thank you for joining us. Let's get this conversation started.
Well, I think we're just going to start with this simple question. How was your morning, Rachael?
Man, started out pretty good, but definitely took a nervous system dysregulation, executive functioning overload detour.
So that's what we're going to talk about. But let's just start with a little synopsis of your vagal nerve.
Like what happened?
Yeah, what happened?
Well, there's a lot going on in the world. So I'm already on high alert just as a kind of baseline. Anyone who's paying attention or has any kind of attunement toward vulnerable people or has experienced trauma and is witnessing other people in constant states of trauma. It's just a hard time. So already I'm at a baseline of we're doing our best to stay within the window of tolerance. But I went to IKEA to run a couple errands, return some things. Long story short, I thought I was buying table placemats, but I was buying table runners. So I had 6 long table runners that I didn't need. So I was taking them back to IKEA. I know. So already that was this is such a minor, ridiculous problem, but I'm doing my due diligence. And as I left IKEA, Michael had said, hey, come by and pick me up on your way home. And I was trying to text him, I'm on my way. And the text wouldn't go through. I did all the things you know how to do, like, it's just the cellular data is having a hard time, or it's flipping between like public Wi-Fi and cellular data. It just kept not going through. Then I tried to call him, and this little message came on that said, you have limited service right now due to an unpaid bill. Which
You
I'm
are
not.
in arrears. You are irresponsible. You have not financially handled your life well, and now you're going to pay for it.
Yeah. And, you know, immediately I'm feeling like, okay, I can't. Michael's at his counseling office, which has a little locked door between like the lobby and the offices. I stop by. I'm trying to figure out what could have happened. We have like auto pay set up. Certainly, we're not above the financial straits that a lot of people are feeling right now. So it wasn't like outside of the realm of possibility that maybe we didn't have enough in our account today for that auto pay. So it wasn't like, how dare you? It was actually like, how many people experience this on the regular, that like a service you need to take care of all the other things you need to take care of gets cut without any warning. But I go to his office. I ring the bell. It's actually in the middle of the counseling hour, so nobody comes.
Oh,
I drive back home. I'm driving in Philly, which means I'm driving on one-way streets. The street I need to turn on was blocked. It was kind of like at every turn, you just need a little mercy for your nervous system to get a minute. My executive functioning is certainly at this point, like, I'm like, okay, just take deep breaths. Like, it's not the end of the world. But I'm already thinking, my daughter's at preschool. Our kids are at school. What if something happens and they can't get a hold of me? What if something happens to Michael and I can't get a hold of him? I'm trying to keep those kind of panic thoughts at bay. I finally park. I get home. I get inside. The Wi-Fi is not working. So I'm like, okay, this really is a thing. And so, it has a prompt. Like when I tried to call Michael, I could call the carrier. I get through to someone. They're like, you're not listed as a person on this account, so you
you
can't
don't
do anything.
exist.
And so then I'm like, trying not to yell at the person who has nothing to do with this and is at the mercy of the same, unjust systems of capitalism that we all are. And then I get back in my car, and I still haven't at this point gotten to the executive functioning possibility that I could find a cafe with Wi-Fi. I just am like, I'm completely cut off. I can't get a hold of anyone. I can't tell Dan I'm not going to be able to record the podcast. I can't tell Michael I can't pick you up, or because I can't get through to you. I go back to his office. It's like right at the end of the counseling hour. He comes walking out. And then I'm like, don't punish him. He doesn't even know. He's had Wi-Fi. He doesn't know the cell service is down. And then I got home 3 minutes before hopping on here. So in some ways,
Well,
it's
it's appropriate
a great
that
time.
we had planned talking about the intersection of abuse and affective emotional dysregulation. I think one of the things that we can begin with is to say that for those of us who have had any significant trauma in the early portions of our life, that one of the effects is some decrease of the hippocampus, which is part of the limbic system that helps regulate affect or helps regulate what's happening in the amygdala. So that simple beginning point of trauma creates a certain degree of fundamental fragmentation that lasts over a significant period of time. And I'm not hoping that people hear a kind of fatalism and determinism, like you're destined to always be struggling with affect. But I think it's so helpful to begin with the reality that the 5-year-old, 6-year-old little Danny was not a good student, already began in the midst of the trauma of my father's death in an accident, having more to bear than some of the other students in my kindergarten, first, second grade. So already I was labeled as a difficult student and one that had periods of either even though it's not language in my grade card, but had periods of extremity. Either I'm looking out the window and practically nothing but a teacher tapping me on the shoulder, bringing me back to the class, or reactive, angry, meltdowns, having to be sent into the, again, I was in school several thousand years ago. And so I was sent into the corner on a stool often. And again, I don't think that's a good technique, but it was a way of creating some degree of regulation. So as we begin to talk about dysregulation, and I'm so sorry that your day began with that, I guess I want to begin with what do you know about your own dysregulation historically, not just in this current event?
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the amygdala and the hippocampus, and I think it might be helpful to just put a few more words for folks. I mean, some people are like, yep, all in on this, understand how the nervous system works. But, the amygdala is a part of our brain that is more like reptilian and keeps us alive. And I've heard you say, Dan, before, like, we need the amygdala. It's not just when we're talking about trauma, it feels like, oh man, an overactive amygdala can feel so disruptive. But when you're driving down the road and someone swerves in front of you, you've used this example, your amygdala is what helps you make a split-second decision to survive.
Yes.
You're not in the prefrontal cortex of like reasoning and meaning making. And so I've often joked with so much like kindness and compassion and tenderness that like I have a very overactive and like very ready amygdala, and that my cells are kind of like little Reaper Cheeps, if you're familiar with C.S. Lewis and the Chronicles of Narnia, like ready to fight, like at all times, like on guard, like everything's a threat, and that's played out not just in emotional reactivity. I would say when we're talking about amygdala responses, we're talking about kind of that fight, flight, or freeze response that might be familiar to you. We're talking about all the biochemicals that kind of activate us toward survival. And yeah, so like that's played out in my emotions, certainly. It's played out in pretty profound and at times debilitating anxiety. And it's played out in a lot of autoimmune response, like allergies and asthma, where, your immune system is kind of like, everything's a threat. We will inflame, we will respond. And so I think for me, it's been a pretty holistic path to healing. And I have many memories throughout a lot of my childhood of feeling very dysregulated. That would never have been language. I would have used like I was very afraid, or I was anxious, or I was kind of crazy in these moments where, yeah, there was I don't have a lot of experience of dissociation like some people do in their trauma stories because of the nature of my story. Dissociation often came after the crisis and overwhelm when I needed comfort. That's how I got comfort, through dissociation. But in the midst of the overwhelm, pretty activated, and just a lot of. I remember even like in elementary school, I would have put words to, I feel afraid. My tummy is turning. I feel scared to be away from my mom. I feel like there was just kind of always like a hypervigilance to the world around me and feelings of like unease that I couldn't put words to. Now, I've talked before in the podcast, I was a long distance runner from like 5th grade to my sophomore year of college. And I think that act of like running, that bilateral stimulation, the production of a lot of endorphin, like that kind of could help me manage things and kind of keep things contained. And then when I quit running in the middle of college, it was like, I could laugh because it's like, it was kind of my like moment of like this good Southern Baptist girl being told therapies for like really crazy people, as if like it's a bad thing to be crazy. Like it was my moment of like, well, I'm officially crazy because my nervous system had no resources then to kind of regulate like I had, and I didn't know I needed help regulating. It's like looking back with the tools and skills I have now, which I would have to look up her name, but I was just reading Hilary McBride's Holy Hurt, and I think it's Michelle Panchuk. She's a philosopher, but she talks about how like when religious or like she's speaking more to Christianity, but like when religious entities don't give people the resources and tools to understand their body, that's a form of hermeneutical injustice. And I'm like, there was a lot of hermeneutical injustice around like making sense of how my body was responding. So for me, this relationship with our bodies and dysregulation feels so much more than, yeah, just bodily or psychological. It's also deeply spiritual because the
Oh,
ways in which people
yes.
translated what was happening got really like spiritualized. So not only was I maybe crazy, you know, difficult, afraid, but I was also unfaithful
Mm.
because these realities were kind of spilling out. It was like if a cup was overflowing. They were very external. I couldn't necessarily hide them. Yeah.
Well, and if we can underscore, almost all forms of dysregulation create on behalf of others some degree of dysregulation. And there's judgment, there is accusation. Instead of having a sense of, I can be attuned, and that's one of the things we'll come back to. How do you get attuned to your own body when you're dysregulated? Because being attuned requires a certain degree of quiet, a certain stance of listening. So a lot of this work has to happen before the dysregulation. That ability to be able to go with no judgment, with no accusation, I'm dysregulated.
Mm.
I'm fragmenting right now. And how we begin that process of being able to go, particularly, we'll come back to this term, for those who have a history of abuse, there's likely the extremity between some degree of activation, extremity of response that has met with a lot of judgment. And therefore, we've learned at some level not to care for, but to hide and suppress. And then when you can't, the byproduct will likely be some degree of relational fragmentation. I
Mhm.
will not be seen as acceptable in
Mhm.
a marriage, in a friendship, in a school setting, in a work setting. So we've got to know that in that extremity, we're actually paralleling the sympathetic and parasympathetic system. The sympathetic system is what activates the fight flight. The parasympathetic is what creates the notion of rest and digest. That is the ability to come down. And literally, every breath you take is activation and rest, and then back and forth. But what happens with emotional dysregulation, as you put so well this morning, it's a sense of spiral, and
Mhm.
then things get attached. It's almost like a tornado where it isn't just the wind now, it's the debris caught up in the swirling mass that begins to literally create its own damage. And so when we step back and begin to ask, well, what's going on? We know that the vagal nerve that runs from the core of our brain, the medulla oblongata, there's certain words I just like saying. And that's just a part of the brain that I go, oh, medulla oblongata, you need. And it runs from our brain down
Mhm.
through our throat, down through our chest, through our heart, down into our stomach and to our visceral elements. And it's the major highway of our capacity to regulate, to have rest. And when the vagal nerve is activated in that sense. We don't have language for many of us, but even more importantly, we don't have structures that we have come to see as part of our spiritual discipline. Part of what it means to be a follower of Jesus is, in one sense, to care for the temple, to tend to the temple, and to, in one sense, not merely have knowledge, but also a capacity to honor what the body is bringing. So I'd love to hear what you're thinking as you hear all that.
Oh, I'm just once again thinking, man, this is just all information that would have been so helpful, 30 years ago, for me and my life. And I was thinking about how, when we're talking about abuse, whether that's happening in a family system, in a relationship, or even on larger scale of systemic oppression, right? it- some of the injustice is that what we interpret is we're disordered. So our bodies are disordered when actually the vagus nerve, in response to terror, in response to violation, in response to humiliation and unsafety, is actually
Doing its
responding how
good
it's meant
job.
to, right? And
Yeah.
so what does it look like to get to move toward that with mercy? And that's what we're talking about today is what tools and resources are available to us in the work of mercy, while we also know the work of justice to keep pursuing, bringing heaven to earth, so to speak, so that we're not having to have constantly dysregulated nervous systems in response to terror, horror, or, vulnerability. So I was just thinking about how different my posture to my own body would have been, in some ways, if the invitation to understand what was happening to my body was like a perfectly reasonable and heartbreaking response to the
Yes.
stimulus of my
Yes.
world. That wouldn't have taken away the suffering, so to speak, but I think it would have given me a deeper compassion and, in some ways, like a righteous anger to be like, I'm going to give myself every good resource available so that even though suffering might persist, I don't have to punish myself or heap on shame, you know, in this kind of ongoing work, because I think I've been given a lot of tools and resources, and I still found myself today in that tornadic swirl that felt so familiar, and the kind of invitation to heap on more burdens of like shame, of contempt toward myself, to act out in violence, right? And it makes me think about like a lot of what I was doing, all of this was playing out while I was driving. And you and I both know I have a a relationship with driving, and it's interesting because the more I've spent time with my
Wait a minute. A
stories,
relationship with driving.
I have a
Okay.
relationship with driving.
You have a relationship with other
I
drivers
have a relationship
while
with
you
other
drive,
drivers while I drive.
which shall I just put words to so we can get cut to the chase?
Sure.
Instead of provoking like a rage incident on the road, you preclude that by vocal, intense interactions with evaluating other people's judgment. It is one of the most entertaining experiences of my driving life to be as a passenger in the car in particularly what comes to mind, of course, is when we were in Los Angeles and I had the privilege, like there are 18, I said almost aisles, what's the word?
Lanes.
18 lanes. It was totally fascinating, but it was clear that it's like your rage, which really wasn't rage, but was intense interactions, was a form of finding regulation to manage what, frankly, for anyone who doesn't drive LA roads, is a very anxiety-producing experience. Is that a fair way of putting
That's
it?
very fair. And, it's interesting because I've been doing a lot of work around like, why do I have such why does traffic, and I think I could actually say I feel entrapped. And I actually do have a lot
Mhm.
of stories that involve being trapped in a car, feeling a lot of panic. And so I have like so much compassion, but yeah, it is like if I can at least verbalize the stress I'm feeling, it does allow me to like stay more grounded, which gets trickier when you have kids, and especially like a 3-year-old that you're trying to teach how to be like kind and honoring and dignifying to other humans. And, you're just calling everyone a moron. And especially when we were just in Seattle recently, Michael was like, "Are you aware that you've been calling people a moron a lot? And it's actually causing me distress. It's causing me dysregulation."
Mm.
And, so like I can laugh about it because it is like an idiosyncratic quirk about me. And it can be troubling at times, like, the amount of stress I'm feeling in my body and the amount of, like, yeah, like, contempt I'm keeping at bay for other drivers that I perceive are trying to kill me, is really what it feels like in my body. Like, your lack of driving efficiently is against me, and that's pronounced in Seattle if anyone has actually driven the Pacific Northwest. It's a whole thing in and of itself. Philly is like, I actually drive like a grandma, and actually most of the time I don't drive. I let Michael drive, because it's the wild, wild west out here, and there's no rules. And so you kinda have to drive like a lot more assertive and safe and, whatever. But I still feel the same like dysregulation in my body. And so, yeah, I don't know where to go with that other than if you have any other vagus nerve regulating
Well,
ideas. Like maybe I need to sing or hum. Like that might be because like Evie has been coming home from preschool, and like for like an hour after preschool, she'll go, like just to make this sound. And I'm like, oh, she's relieving the stress of her body through like a kind of humming or articulation of noise that's relieving all this anxiety she's had to hold from like following rules and learning how to socialize, interact, and share with other humans. So maybe I need to switch to a form of humming. But I would love to hear other
well, when we get there, but this is to me why I keep coming back to Psalm 131. And it's a pretty brief psalm, so I'm going to read it. My heart is not proud, Lord. My eyes are not
Mm,
haughty. I do not concern myself with great matters or things too
hmm,
wonderful for me,
hmm,
but I know how to calm and quiet myself. I'm like a weaned child with its mother. Like a weaned
hmm,
child, I am content. Now, another verse, and that is Israel, put your hope in the Lord, both now and forevermore. But at that simple
hmm,
phrase in verse 2, I know how to calm
hmm,
my soul, body, splagna. I know
hmm,
how to calm my amygdala. I know how to regulate my vagal nerve. Now, of course, that's not fully said in that psalm, but we can understand a way of engagement that at least begins to say dysregulation is not manipulation. Dysregulation is not
hmm,
a cruel contempt for others trying to be in control. It is an effort to find a safe spot
hmm,
where we're no longer in the position where our sympathetic system, fight and flight, the amygdala, is indeed in control in a way in which our parasympathetic system is no longer capable in the same way of regulation. So when we come back and to go, particularly those with stories of physical, emotional sexual abuse, where we can put it in language we've addressed many other times, capital T trauma. If you don't struggle with some degree of affective emotional dysregulation, it's largely because you've so quieted your soul due to dysregulation, dissociation, that you're probably, if I can put it in a way that sounds awful, you're sort of dead inside.
hmm,
And that's as big a problem, if not more. So when you've learned to cut off the affect that's actually happening in you, yeah, You are more socially acceptable. You don't dysregulate others. You are probably valued for being so calm. But I do want to say there's so much more to you, so much more that needs to be engaged. So if we can disrupt shame and contempt here, if we can begin to say, yeah, I'm not suggesting that people should just be dysregulated and everybody go, oh, we get it. You've got trauma, so you can just do whatever you want. That's
No.
absolutely, again, a straw person
Well,
argument.
and why we have generational trauma, like why we have ancestors with a lot of unhealed trauma that's repeating and reenacting harm and being passed down. So I would hope no one is hearing us say that.
Yeah, exactly. So humming, let's just start with that since you brought that up. The vagal nerve runs essentially kind of right by our ears and right through our throat.
Hmm.
So just that alone, that when you hum, you're activating the vagal nerve. And so Evie, brilliant as she is, has intuitively experienced what creates calm. She's living out Psalm 131. And it may sound to those around her dysregulating,
Mm-hmm.
but humming. Now, some of us, and you know this is true because you've heard my voice before, cacophonous. It's a dark assault against beauty in the universe. But I can hum.
Oh.
And even my humming is calming. But you have a gorgeous voice. It's part of the story of being captured and capturing your beloved Michael. Is your joint singing in the
Our
context?
karaoke.
Yes, yeah. But what I'm saying is, do you sing? And do you sing when you're dysregulated? And right there is one of the calming. And even if you are not in a context where you can hum or you can sing, music, calming music is going to activate the vagal nerve. So that's at least
Mm-hmm.
a central category. And again, you have Ephesians 5, where we're talking about singing spiritual songs, hymns, and it's in contrast to don't be addicted to wine. So right there, Paul is speaking about the reality of you can numb out through alcohol. You can use alcohol to lower, in so many ways, your sympathetic system. But you don't need to do that if you allow yourself to begin the process humming, singing, and bringing back something of beauty in the context of our own spiritual walk.
Mm-hmm.
Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, where my thoughts went is like, again, how many different cultures have chants and songs and spirituals and rituals around music that before we ever had a scientific language of trauma were wisdom and experiences being passed down that are just a part of us being human and being human in community. Um, I know Abby Wong Hefter before when she's talked about attachment and nervous system regulation, she mentioned that like Psalm 23 in Hebrew would have been sung and chanted in community, and that there's even something about like I just like something that some of us are familiar with, but maybe some things we've lost as well. So I just think it's fascinating how and beautiful to me that some of the tools available to us don't require access to capital, don't require like can happen just within our body. So I love humming and I knew intuitively when Evie was making this sound for about 45 minutes on and off. I just kept saying to her, "Does that feel comforting? Does that feel soothing?" And she was like, "Mm-hmm," and then just like keep on with what she was doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And as you put it, the experience of being able to bless by naming it on her behalf is not only calling attention, but calling attention in a way that honors you have found ways to tend to your body. Now, let me bring a couple other examples. We have what is called the mammalian dive response. Ever heard of that before?
Maybe like a mammal diving.
Well,
Okay.
it's mammals have limbic systems.
Yeah.
Limbic systems need care. And one of the things that happens when you go underwater, particularly cold water, is a whole bunch of things that begin to occur that, without boring our audience, being able to say that the brainstem begins to orchestrate a response that holds the sympathetic and parasympathetic system together in a new way. So taking cold water and splashing it on your face, if you've got the time, you didn't today, take a cold shower. Cold plunging, even if it sounds like a form of medieval torture, are ways to regulate. Now, I bought many years ago like $125 plastic, really nothing more than container. And Wednesdays would be the day that I see my clients. There are Mondays and Tuesdays where I'm in meetings. And I know that even though I love what I get to do, I need a certain level of regulation before I bring my body into engagement with my beloved. And so 2 minutes of cold plunging, even though every time I do it, I hate myself, at least for the first 30 seconds. But it begins to change the capacity of how our body comes to regulation. And so humming, cold, massage of your neck on both sides, because that's generally where the vagal nerve is running. So tending to your throat, literally putting heat on your throat, begins to move. And there are pressure points that you can find that begins to change. But it comes back to Psalm 131. I know how to regulate myself when I'm in the middle of a kind of dysregulation. Again, that's my adaptation of that passage. But the fact of being able to go, gosh, given my daily life and given the nature of my own sense of extremity, moving between reactive and dissociative structures, it helps me not excuse, but understand why I spent so many years misusing alcohol and drugs. Why the process of trying to come to an engagement with the truth of my past and the abuse, and somehow learning how to engage the complexities of relationship set me up. Again, I'm fully responsible, but set me up to utilize addictive structures to be a self-soothing, self-regulating, self-medicating process. So the more, I think what we're underscoring is, the more we understand what's happening, the more we forsake and defiantly stand against every judgment that's been made about us, and then begin the process of saying, it is my body, and I'm response able to engage, even though it doesn't work quickly. And we also know breathing, what's often called trauma breathing, 4 count at least in, 4 count hold, 4 count release. And for many people, that trauma breathing actually activates the sympathetic system. It actually makes them more anxious. So for many, the process will require in doing things that will help regulate, actually it increases a sense of it's not working. Well, a lot of these things don't work the moment you put cold water on, the moment you take an ice pack and put it on the back of your neck. But the body is the body, and it isn't a question of will it work. It's certain to work because that's the reflex structure God has created in the body. So even the process can be anxiety producing.
That's really helpful to hear. So keep going. That's really helpful to hear.
But again, this is why you do need left brain processes, not just right brain regulation. You need to know, I'm feeling anxious. Every time I do trauma breathing, I've used it with countless people. I've done it on my own. And I'd say the first 2 minutes, I'm just totally miserable.
Well, that's why I'm saying it's really helpful to hear, because no one's ever said that to me before. And you're supposed to be really good at breathing if you work in trauma and you've been healing. And I feel like I'm still like, for example, in my mindfulness breathing class, it was like, oh yeah, I've been working on breathing for 20 years and I still am like, this is not working. I feel worse. I can't slow down. And so it's actually, I'm just kind of like feeling a little bit embarrassed that I'm confessing out loud. Like, yeah, anytime someone's like, do this box breathing or do this thing, or when my spiritual director is inviting me to breathe, I'm like, oh, here we go. Like, it's going to feel like I'm going to feel actually more anxious, but I'm actually going to try to present as though it's working because it's supposed to be working.
It's
I'm supposed to be good at breathing.
Yes. Yeah. So again, to underscore that, and again, let me change the category for a moment. For you to give up calling people morons in the driving process is something that honors what you want on behalf of your daughter, because some of our self-regulation is not going to honor who and what we want to be on behalf of others. But on the other hand, if you stop narrating the experience of being in the car, I think you're developing on behalf of Evie and your children. They have a good chance of being brilliant stand-up comics in the future.
I mean, what is funny is that one of my most common phrases when I'm driving and narrating is choose life, person. And actually, when Evie started mimicking driving, when she first could use language, all she would say is, go people, go people. Like, she would like put her hands up on a steering wheel and just be like, go people. And Michael and I would laugh like so much because it was like, well, that's what she thinks of driving, is you just hold the steering wheel and you shout, go people. And at least it's not go morons. So I did feel like we were getting somewhere.
Well, and again, to know that when we begin to allow the parasympathetic system to come back online, the reason that first couple minutes feels more anxious is it's the body saying, if I rest here, the tiger's going to catch up.
Yeah.
I'm going to get eaten. And so that ability to, again, left brain, comprehend, I'm going to breathe, but I'm going to be miserable. And 2 minutes in, it's like, again, the cold plunge. The first 30 seconds, if you've ever done it, unless you are a pure sadist, you're going to be going, why do I hate myself? Why have I done this to myself? But that mammalian dive response is built into the body to begin to change heart rate, to actually produce more oxygen in our blood. It begins to change the trigeminal nerve that sends basically structures to the brainstem saying, it's okay. We can begin underwater to begin to come back. And in that, I keep coming back to Psalm 131. This is not taught as part of our spirituality. It's not taught as spiritual discipline. Again, so much of prayer is meant to be an engagement with our heart before God. In other words, there are times where if you look at the Psalms of lament and complaint, it is the acknowledgement of dysregulation. But in that, there's often, even toward the end of the psalm, except for Psalm 88, a movement toward and trust in the Lord, O Israel. Put your hope in him now and forever. So in the interplay, we can go back and forth between the sympathetic, parasympathetic system, and to be able to go, there are certain moments where, I'm thinking of a recent moment where Becky and I were driving in Seattle. Let's just say, I love Seattle. I'm a Seattleite, but it is the most passive-aggressive portion of the country. And it shows itself in the driving. Like as a motorcyclist, I know the person who just put their signal on should be moving over into my lane, but they don't. But right when I'm near, they're going to move. That's passive aggressive. I've done what's right. I put my signal on, but it's erratic as to when you're going to move. I'd rather a person just cut me off. And so, when I rode my motorcycle in other cities, knowing something of the character of the city helps the creation of regulation. So knowing our world, knowing our body, knowing what God wants, and that is to tend to good care in a way without judgment, and honoring the gift of being able to be a very vocal driver and to know it's a beautiful thing. I am kind of sad that I haven't ridden with you for...
Go, people! Choose life!
And that's a good ending. This is indeed choosing life.
Thank you again for joining us. We hope that the conversations we share with you here on the Allender Center podcast have touched your heart and sparked a sense of hope within you. Our work at the Allender Center is fueled by the support of people like you. As a nonprofit organization housed within the Seattle School of Theology and Psychology, our mission is to boldly engage the impact of trauma and abuse on the human heart and to provide hope and healing to individuals, families, and communities. Your contributions directly contribute to making this vision a reality. If you feel moved to join us in this work, we invite you to consider making a one-time or monthly gift. Your donation, no matter the size, plays a significant role in bringing the hope of redemption and healing to so many. To give, simply visit theallendercenter.org/give. Once again, we extend our heartfelt gratitude for your support. Together, we can continue to bring hope and healing to those who need it. Thank you.
The Allender Center podcast is produced by the Seattle School of Theology and Psychology.
If you'd like more information about the Allender Center, you can look at theallendercenter.org.